Hi, my name is John Teravskis, and I'm with WGR Southwest, and I have here today Rebecca Greenwood with the State Water Resources Control Board. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I asked you to come in today to talk about Level 2 ERAs. So we have a lot of industrial facilities who are under the Industrial General Permit, and they did some monitoring a couple years ago, and they ended up being Level 1 ERAs. But maybe they did a technical report and they did some more monitoring. Things didn't go as planned. They had some NAL exceedances, so now they're levels 2s, and they're all wondering, what do we do now? What's our options? So I've asked you to come today and talk to them about what they're looking at and what they're obligated to do under the permit, and maybe what are some of the options they should consider.
Yeah, those are all really good things, and it's really important for us at the State Board to make sure that everybody has a really good, solid view on what's going on and what needs to be done to make sure that they're in compliance with our IGP, the Industrial General Permit. And basically, we want to make sure that we go through the overview of what you kind of just talked through. So we're going to go over our exceedance response actions, the ERAs. We'll go over the ERA timeline, and we're going to go over the ERA expectations for Level 2. And basically, what I want to do first is start out at level baseline or Level 1 and go back to the very beginning with what we really kind of started with.
Okay.
And so, as we know, we adopted the permit in 2015, and everybody started at baseline. That was our beautiful box 1, and everybody was sitting pretty, and we were looking to get their sampling. As everybody knows, we do our monitoring for 4 samples, 2 in the beginning, 2 in the second half of the reporting year.
Right.
And if you had any of those samples that had exceeded our NAL, our numeric action level, you would be triggering a exceedance response action. So it's really important to note that an exceedance of an NAL is not a violation in and of itself, but failing to complete an exceedance response action is.
That's an important point. And when we're talking numeric action levels, there's 2 different types. So just to remind people, there were the annual NALs, where they're averaging data from all 4 sampling events that you talked about. And then there's another kind.
Yeah, the instantaneous maximum NALs, which are currently only there for a couple of the parameters that we have, one of them being pH, and the other would be oil and grease and TSS.
Okay, so that first year they did some monitoring, everybody's baseline, and they're monitoring for a minimum of 4 constituents, but there's probably others that we won't take time to review, but there are other requirements that they might be testing for other analytes. And they're comparing those against these NALs. And at the end of the year, their status may change.
Yeah, so if you have that exceedance, you're going to go into a level. And that first level that we had from, if you're looking at the beginning of the permit, was you had a sampling in 15 and 16 reporting year, and you had an exceedance, be it an annual NAL or an instantaneous maximum NAL exceedance. You would move into Level 1 July 1 of the following reporting year. And that would trigger you to do a couple of things. And for Level 1, we require a Level 1 ERA evaluation and a Level 1 ERA report. And those would require a qualified industrial stormwater practitioner or a QISP, and you would go through your site and you would hopefully address some of the BMPs and some of the issues we might have been having. But if you couldn't quite get there and you did all your sampling and you still had some exceedances, you might go to Level 2. And that Level 2 would happen when you go and you've completed your sampling for the year and we show that you had an annual or an instantaneous maximum exceedance, you would go to Level 2.
Okay, so the first opportunity to go to Level 1 was July 1st, 2016.
Correct.
And the first opportunity to go to Level 2 is July 1st, or was July 1st, 2017.
Yeah.
Now, it's, I guess, possible that somebody has remained baseline for the first 2 years, but now something's changed. Their analytical concentrations have gone up for some reason. They could now just be entering Level 1 at this point, right? So it's not necessarily a 2016 and 2017 thing, but it's ongoing.
Yeah, you can have any level status at any one time. So you can have a parameter, because that's what we base our exceedances on, in Level 1, And then you could have another parameter like TSS at level 2, or maybe even a third parameter like pH at baseline. So you could be in multiple levels at any one given point in this permit.
Okay, that's important to know. Okay, so we have a group of industries or industrial facilities right now that are now looking for the first time at level 2. What do they need to be thinking?
So for the level 2, we have a basic timeline. If you've gone through your first ERA level 1 and you didn't quite make it back down, and you're looking at level 2, you're going to have to do two main things. And those two main things are the level 2 ERA action plan and the level 2 ERA technical report. And the technical report consists of some demonstrations that we'll get into at a later point in time. But what we really want to focus on right now is that you're getting that timeline and when you're trying to submit these things. So looking at the level 2 next steps, it's really important that you're looking to make sure that you have all of these things done, because as I mentioned before, it's not a violation to have an exceedance of an NAL, but it is a violation if you don't complete these actions. And the regional boards and state board, along with the public, because we are entering this data into a publicly available database online, SMARTS, that it could be a violation if you're not submitting these and they're not compliant with what we need based on the permit.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit maybe what goes into this action plan, this first step that they got first year to address?
Yeah, so the level 2 ERA action plan, like I mentioned before, as we went through level 1, we did have that qualified industrial stormwater practitioner. And you're submitting it in SMARTS, and you're making sure that it's a comprehensive timeline and that you're going through it and that you're going to be laying out what you're going to be doing over the next couple of years, because level 2 is a lot longer process than the level 1 process. And in some cases, you're going to go up and down for other parameters, and you might not just be looking at one parameter in level 2. Maybe in the next year, you're looking at another parameter that you have to add.
Okay. What types of things are you going to want to see in this action plan?
So per the permit, the level 2 ERA action plan requires that you address each NAL exceedance. And each NAL exceedance is supposed to be addressed per drainage area. So you might have a parameter that's really exceeding in one area, and you want to make sure that you focus to hone in on what's going on to see what's wrong with that area, but you also have to address the facility on a facility-wide basis for that parameter as well. But you really want to focus on making sure that you nail down that exceedance. The next part of the action plan is laying out what we have named as demonstrations. And each demonstration is going to be your attack plan on how you're going to get your NAL exceedance back down. And then finally, what we're going to look for is that you're implementing a schedule and that you're telling us what you're going to do by when and how you think it's going to affect what's going on.
Now, this to me sounds really similar to what they had just done the year before with a level 1 technical report. But obviously now they're more advanced or beyond that. How is this different than the level 1 technical report?
So the level 2 ERA action plan is really important because each level 2 is addressing a parameter. So that parameter is going to have to take on one of these demonstrations that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And each demonstration has a lot of different rules. And these demonstrations are crucial for you to be able to get back down to baseline.
Okay, so it's kind of preparing for the demonstrations then. And when you talk about parameters, we're talking about maybe they had an issue with pH, maybe zinc at another watershed or drainage area, maybe copper in another one. So they're looking facility-wide, but then very drainage area specific as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it really leads me into the next point of some of the guidance that I'd like to give from State Board. And for the action plan, I always say that you have to have an individual plan per parameter, and that's per the permit. But what I say is that it's really acceptable for you to create a master plan, and then you move forward and you introduce parameter-specific chapters that are really important for you to drill down and make sure that you're doing the correct demonstration. And so when I say that you have a master plan, I'm really looking for an overall evaluation of the site. And that overall evaluation of the site is going to address kind of everything. You're looking at your good housekeeping, you're looking at your training and making sure that everybody on your team is knowing what they're doing. And then you're going to kind of review what you did in level 1 and figure out what worked and what didn't really work for you. And then finally, you're going to outline what needs to be addressed as a whole for the facility. And then you would drill down into each chapter for each parameter and address the individual areas and select the demonstrations that you're going to be going through. So those are really important because when you pick a demonstration, that's going to dictate what type of BMPs you're going to get. And that'll get you into when are you implementing your BMPs and what kind of schedule are you looking at to try to correct your NAL exceedances.
All right, that's very good because you do need to have somewhat of a holistic approach because I'm sure there's much of your programs very interrelated. But these chapters, just to be clear, are pollutant specific, right? Not necessarily drainage area specific, but pollutant specific.
Pollutant parameter specific,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Very important. So I guess with that, we can lead into what our first demonstration is. And our first demonstration is the Industrial Activity BMP demonstration. It's part 2A, 1 through 3. I just lovingly call it part 1 of the Industrial BMP demonstration. And this is really important because this is the only demonstration that you can use to get back down to baseline. So with this demonstration, what you're saying is that you're going to achieve compliance with the IGP and that you will be eliminating all future exceedances. And this is really great, and this is what we want everybody to strive for. And it's making sure that you're identifying those pollutant sources that we talked about in those parameter-specific chapters, implementing correct BMPs that are going to actually reduce your pollutant load, and then making sure that you're not going to have any exceedances in the future and that you've implemented a good program across your facility.
This really sounds like what we used to call the iterative approach, this particular demonstration. So they're basically coming up with a game plan saying, here is what we're going to do, maybe treatment, possibly.
Could be.
Or a suite of BMPs, maybe pollution prevention, source control, and treatment. But they're saying, we think this will take us below the NALs.
Yeah. And that's really the bulk of that part 1 for that demonstration. And then leading into that, we also have part 2 of this Industrial Activity BMP demonstration, which is saying that you're going to achieve the compliance with the IGP, but you're not going to meet the NALs in the future. This really is important because it's kind of meeting what industries can do and can't do with their facilities. So we want to make sure that everybody's evaluating appropriate BMPs for their facilities and seeing what works for them. And if they can't afford, or maybe it doesn't fit, or, maybe there's a size criteria and they don't have that type of space on their facility, it's important for them to assess all the BMPs that could be implemented, but then go ahead and implement what they can to try to reduce the load as much as they can.
So let me clarify. Part 1 is we got this great plan. We think it's really going to work. And so they propose that. The part 2 is, well, we don't know if we can actually hit the NAL for copper or whatever. But we have a plan. We're going to do these BMPs, but we can't guarantee we're going to hit that level.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you correct?
Yeah, and it's basically that you're really trying as hard as you can, and you've put up to your industry standard BAT, BCT type of controls that are really good for your industry, but they might not get you to where you need to be.
Yeah. So if I hear you correct, the part 1 leads hopefully back to baseline.
Yeah, part 1 gets you back to baseline.
So, but part 2, where does that lead?
Part 2 will leave you in level 2 indefinitely. And we say indefinitely because currently, right now, the way the permit's written, there's no way to return to baseline if you've submitted one of the other demonstrations or this part 2 of this industrial BMP demonstration that we talked about.
So on a practical basis, what does that mean for an industrial facility if they stay at level 2?
For that right now, it's that you're really trying to achieve the best that you can. And unfortunately, we are not able, with the way that the permit's written, to bring you back down to baseline. But you are showing in a good faith effort, and in our eyes at State Board, that you're doing the best that you can, and you're trying to meet, those NALs that we have for you.
Right, and I heard you say earlier that NAL exceedances are not violations of the permit. It's not going through the process that's the violation. So effectively, they've gone through the process, they worked through the process. Now, I'm assuming that Part 1 and Part 2 have to be submitted to the regional board and approved. In other words, a good faith effort has to be made.
Yeah, and so you're submitting these in SMARTs, and so there will be a review by the state board, regional board, and public, as we talked about before. But they'll be reviewed by usually the regional boards to make sure that you're doing a really site-specific plan and making sure that everything that you're doing is to the best of your ability.
Okay. And who judges that best ability? I mean, you'll have facilities turn in a paper that says, we'll sweep more.
Yeah, so a lot of those come down to the regional boards as they usually conduct the enforcement, and they'll review the reports
Okay.
and say that they're sufficient or not sufficient,
Okay.
and making sure those types
So
of
the
things
regional
happen.
boards will review these and say, no, we don't believe you've done,
Yeah, quite enough.
you're not meeting
Yeah.
the BAT, BCT.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So we got, this is our first demonstration, just to review. We had Part 1, meaning we're pretty optimistic. We think we can put together a suite of BMPs to get us back to baseline. Or Part 2, we've done everything we can. We're going to try to do more, but we're not optimistic about us getting back to baseline.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the first demonstration.
Yeah, so the next portion that I wanted to talk about was a little bit about treatment control BMPs.
Okay.
Because it relates both to the industrial BMP demonstration that we just talked about and some of these other demonstrations that we're going to talk about going forward. And just to talk about the treatment control BMPs, they're listed out in the permit, and there is a volume and a flow-based design storm standard for some of these, which would require a PE to sign off. So it's really important that if you're doing these, that you're making sure that you have the sizing criteria if it's needed. But it's also really important to note that if you're choosing an advanced BMP, that might not be something that needs a flow or a volume-based calculation, because an advanced BMP, as noted in the permit, could be something like exposure minimization.
Okay.
You could put up a storm-resistant shelter, and how would you size a storm-resistant shelter for flow or volume base?
Okay.
So it's really important to know what you need a PE for and what you don't. And these types of things are really good to talk about when you're looking at a facility who has a little bit of space. Maybe they can install something like a treatment train. So you're not going to over-design, a bioswale or a little type of run-on grass patch that'll really help actually reduce the pollutant load, instead of going to a big treatment system that might cost a whole bunch of money, but you might get the same results with something like a little bioswale.
Okay, and all right, that's a good clarification, because in other permits, like municipal permit, a lot of times bioswales are considered treatment, but if we categorize it as an advanced treatment, or I'm sorry, advanced BMP, not treatment, we're just reducing exposure. We're allowing some infiltration, but it isn't the type of treatment that would require a PE certification.
Correct.
But hearing what you're saying, though, it sounds like industrial facilities need to assemble a design team, the QISP.
Yeah.
At this point, you have to have a QISP involved.
Yeah.
Now, very likely a PE if they're looking at treatment.
And so, yeah, if you're looking at treatment, in a lot of cases, you're going to need a PE, because you're going to make sure that you meet those design storm standards if you're going that way. Or even if you're looking in to buy a really expensive treatment tank system, you want to make sure that you don't undersize it or you're not oversizing it, and you're making sure that you're getting the right amount of treatment for your facility.
Okay, and then, of course, the operations, the plant operations. So all those folks need to come together and really come up with a game plan that's going to work.
Yeah, and that's all why this is part of the action plan and telling us what you're going to be doing.
Okay.
So looking at that, we're going to move on to the next demonstration, which is the non-industrial source demonstration. And I like to call this one the state your case. This is really, you're looking at your NAL exceedances, but you're saying that they're not solely attributed to your industrial activity, that they're solely attributed to this non-industrial pollutant source.
Okay.
So it's really important. And what I really like to look at for these is where is it coming from? Are you getting run on? Do you have aerial deposition? Is there something that's going on outside of your facility that's getting on to your facility somehow?
This is where the discharge says, it's not me, right?
Yeah, it's not me, so.
And they might be right.
Yeah, and they might be right. And it's really important to make sure that they're taking good sampling, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but making sure that they're really trying to prove that it's not their industrial activity.
Okay, what would be some examples of this, types of things that might be causing this?
So we have some cases where there are things like run-on. So say that you're in an industrial park type area and you're auto dismantler, and somewhere to the left of you, you have somebody who's doing granite countertops or something, whatever it may be, or sands or something. And they have stockpiles of things outside, and those sediments and everything is running onto your site and running off of your site.
Sending turbid water on your site.
And you're having these problems with this TSS issue or other types of issues. And so you're wanting to look at that it's not your issue. So you may have some of those exceedances. You may be a contributor to some of those exceedances, but it's not just you, that you're not the sole exceedance of the parameter.
So you're going to have to do some science here.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to prove that your neighbor is sending you the lion's share of the pollutants, which is causing you to go over to NALs, where if you didn't have that issue, you'd be under.
Yeah, and the best way to look at it, and it's a really gross oversimplification, but if you take a sample that's running on and you get a 1500 TSS reading, and then it flows over your site, and then you're looking at the end of your discharge point and you only put 1525 out. Your contribution may only be 25, TSS. So it's really important to make sure that you're doing the right kind of sampling.
Of course, the water board's going to look for a lot more evidence than just that.
Yeah. Like I said, gross oversimplification.
But okay, so you're going to have to basically do the science to show, to make your case. You said this is, tell us your case.
Yeah.
Of why you believe it's not you.
Yeah. And then really similarly to that, we also have the natural background pollutant source demonstration, which is pretty much the same thing. But instead of saying that it's a non-industrial source, you're saying that it's coming from the natural background. And that could be things like looking at the geology and the soils of what's around you and other types of features in the area that could be affecting what's coming onto your site.
Like iron, for example. If your soils are high in iron and you have an unpaved site, then you may have that. Or even if your site's paved, you might be getting wind deposition from dust coming from all around you.
Yeah, again, some facilities are really unfortunate that they are in some red dirts, and red dirts are really clay and iron rich, and some of those can, if you're taking your TSS samples, you could get more TSS, you could get a higher hit on iron. It's just depending, and so you want to make sure, again, that you are not the sole exceedance. So you could be part of the exceedance, but you're not the one that's causing the final exceedance. So it's making sure that your portion is not the larger of the...
Okay, what's the timing on these demonstrations then? When do they need to do these?
So for the demonstrations are going to happen in between when you submit your action plan. So you're going to take your action plan and you say, I'm going to try demonstrations, natural background, and industrial BMP. And then you're going to go through, you're going to have a year to implement these and implement these new BMPs. And then you'll be able to submit your level 2 ERA technical report the next year, which our first technical reports will be coming in January of 2019.
Okay. All right, so I get it. The action plan is really stating your intentions. We think this is what's happening. You don't have to necessarily... I guess you could change your mind later if you do some research and realize that there's something else that's going on. But it's your best intentions. We think this is what's going on. This is what we're planning to do.
Yeah, and we allow for updates and revisions of your action plan. If you start out with one demonstration and then you find that it's not going to work out for you, you can switch demonstrations. So you're not tied into one demonstration if you select it. And you can select multiple demonstrations. But you just have to be aware of what will get you out of level 2 and, what's going to keep you there.
So come a year later, then you're submitting your technical report. basically, this is now what we have found and what we're going to do about it. Okay, good. So you had mentioned if we're any of these two last demonstrations, non-industrial and natural background, that they don't lead back to baseline.
Yeah, those are going to leave you at level 2. And these are really important because when you go to level 2, you're going to be doing all this additional sampling. As we talked about, proving that you're not the sole, contributor to exceedance. You want to make sure that you're doing really good comparative sampling and that everything is relatable and relevant. So these types of things are going to get summarized, and as you're going through, this is where you might make adjustments in your action plan and say, this demonstration is really not working out for me. I'm going to try something else. So it's really important to look at what you're doing and why, and don't just go sampling just to go sampling and spend a whole bunch of money, but really make sure that you're getting what you need to prove some of these demonstrations.
Okay. So there is a financial impact to these facilities that staying at level 2. There's more sampling, it sounds like.
Well, not more sampling. I mean, you're still just required to take your 4 QSEs.
Okay.
But if you choose to try to do something like a natural background demonstration, you might do something like sampling off-site or upstream, trying to figure out what's coming onto your site and then what's leaving your site.
Okay. But you might just end up staying at level 2 because you've had to select these last 2 demonstrations or the part 2 of the first demonstration.
Yeah. And then, like I said, we will be addressing that in the future permit, and we will really take these reports and study them and make sure that we know what's going on at all these facilities to figure out what to do with them and to try to help them.
Very good.
Yeah. And then so lastly, to wrap up everything, since we've gone through the action plan now and you've implemented all your BMPs and you've been doing your demonstrations, you're going to do this level 2 ERA technical report. And it is called a technical report because we want to see a robust report that really makes a lot of sense and draws conclusions on what you've been doing with your BMP demonstrations or your natural background demonstrations. And it should really include a really good review of your data, providing a really strong rationale of why you chose what you chose, and summarizing what's happened from what you chose. It might not be that you got what you expected at the end of it. So it's really important that you go over all of it and that you're hitting all of the requirements in the IGP.
Okay, so this report's going to be uploaded to Smarts?
Yeah, so this report's going to be uploaded to Smarts, and I kind of want to throw this in here is that if you are uploading it into Smarts, we do allow for an automatic extension if you do need some more time. So we do allow for an automatic one-time 6-month extension through Smarts. It'll be just like pushing a button. You'll enter a reason, upload an updated action report, and then submit what you're going to be doing on the interim until you can kind of get something going on. So that's really important. And then if you need more time, which may come up when you're doing new types of BMPs or bigger types of BMPs, or if you're really interested in looking at compliance options with the new TMDL compliance option and bigger IGP amendment that's going to come out in the winter of 2017, this might be for you. You can review what you're looking to do for BMPs, to say if you want to do on-site capture or off-site capture with some of these compliance options, to ask for a greater extension from the regional board. But if that happens, you will have to ask for that extension from the regional board directly and get it in writing that you need a longer amount of time.
Okay, good. So they're putting together these plans and they're putting in treatment systems or some sort of suite of BMPs to address this. What takes them back to baseline then?
So this is a great question, and we talked about it before. If you submitted the Industrial BMP Part 2, the non-industrial pollutant source demonstration, the natural background pollutant source demonstration, you're ineligible to return to baseline. Yeah. So that's really important.
For that parameter, right?
For that parameter.
So it might be iron because you have high iron soils.
Yes.
But you may have had issues with other pollutants that were in the first demonstration.
Yeah, so you might have chosen a different demonstration for each parameter. So
Okay.
again, depending on which demonstration you chose for that parameter, it would make you either eligible or ineligible to return to baseline. And then so returning to baseline, if you selected that Industrial BMP demonstration part 1, and you've taken 4 consecutive QSEs that have met the NALs, so you have no exceedances per the definition of the permit, you are allowed to return to baseline.
Now, Rebecca, let me ask you, what if either conditions change, or let's say they put in a treatment system to address a pollutant they're going to handle under the first demonstration, but that treatment system also takes care of the iron, which they had in a natural background demonstration, and now they're getting low iron levels below the NALs. Can they get back to baseline for that?
Yeah, you can update your report and say that, hey, I installed this really great treatment system. Instead of just treating the initial parameter that I thought I was going to treat, I am now additionally treating iron. I may have submitted a natural background demonstration before, but now I want to tag on to this industrial BMP demonstration, and that would allow you to get back down to baseline if you could prove
Okay.
that you could get that sampling under the
Okay,
NAL.
so the bottom line are the results. If the results for any reason drop below the NALs, you can get these 4 consecutive below NAL readings, then you could get back to baseline.
Yeah, as long as you change your your action plan and your technical
Update
report,
your
make
reports.
sure that you're updating them to say that this is the route that I'm trying to take now.
Okay.
You can totally do that.
Okay,
And then additionally, if you do have additional exceedance and you were one of the people who were able to return to baseline from level 2. So let's say you implemented all of your BMPs and you got back down to baseline. If you did in the future have an exceedance for that same parameter, you would move directly back to level 2. You
Oh.
do not go through the level 1 process
Okay.
again. So that would require you updating your demonstration. Maybe you say it's not feasible for me to keep up maintenance on some of these treatment systems, and it's not going to work out that way. So then you go to a different type of demonstration.
so we're talking that when you say immediate, that it's the next July 1st when the status changed.
Yeah, when we run the calculation for an exceedance, because the NAL exceedances are based off of the annual,
That's right.
which is based off a reporting period, or an instantaneous, which again is based off a reporting period. So,
Okay, good.
yeah.
All right, well, so if they have questions, and I'm sure a lot of facilities are going to have questions, there's places they can go for help. One, they're going to need to have a QISP.
Yes.
And the QISP has had to go through a certain amount of training to get that certification. So hopefully the QISPs will have some answers for industrial facilities. But if a QISP has a question, I'm sure many of us will. Can we call you? Can we contact you, the regional boards?
Yeah, I strongly encourage everybody, if you have questions, reach out to myself, reach out to the Stormwater Help Desk, reach out to your regional boards. And I really advocate for regional board interaction, because sometimes they're the people you're directly dealing with. They're the ones who do the inspections and conduct the enforcement. So you reaching out and showing a good faith effort and trying to figure out what you're getting to, and being on the same page with them is really important.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for coming in today and clarifying these ERA level 2s. And we thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, we'll have the contact information for the State Water Board on screen. So feel free to contact them or call WGR. We'd be happy to help you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.